Cleveland Baxter, retiring after 20 years of law enforcement. He was also a part of the Pan American Referee Committee, the World Karate Federation Commission, and owner of Baxter Dojo. Ina Silva, 19 years police officer in Elizabeth, New Jersey. She currently is the lead officer for fifth graders running drug prevention sessions. She also teaches martial arts to those who have special needs. Robert Utsey, serving 33 years in law enforcement. He is also a USA NCAF referee and a Pan American Level A referee, also a part of Harakan Gajuku. Cedric Barksdale, owner of Ronin Shotokan Karate, served 25 years in law enforcement. The last 15 years of his career, he was part of the FBI. He is also a high-level referee in both Pan American and WKF. Laura Palacio Gonzalez, currently in law enforcement for 9 years. She is a Spanish champion and has won various medals for the Spanish team, including European Games as well as World Championship. Brody Burns has served for 24 years in law enforcement, currently the head coach for USA Karate and a part of Academy of Classical Karate.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Muhammad, for those of you who I haven't met, and this is Karate for Change. Today, we're going to be having a conversation around the intersectionality between law enforcement and the martial arts. Right now, there's a lot of tension between much of society and law enforcement. And what we wanted to do with Karate for Change was empower the voices of some people we knew who have spent time in law enforcement, but also can talk about their background in martial arts and how that's maybe supported their journey in their career of law enforcement. What we want here at Karate for Change is to start a conversation. The goal and the role of service jobs, it's to help improve society, right? It's to help better people, or better people's way of living, or provide a lifestyle that allows them to have the space to better their way of life. And so my next question, and anybody can answer this that wants to, is growing up, how were police officers portrayed in your community, and what motivated you to become a police officer or get into law enforcement? And anybody can jump into that.
Well, at first I want to say I am really honored to be a member of this panel too. I mean, I really respect everybody on here. And of course, Cleve and Cedric, you guys have been my heroes for a while with karate, and I love working with you guys at our events and things. Lots of respect there. And to know that the work you do also in law enforcement with your being experts at karate as well is impressive to me. But I know it'll come as a shock to some people, but I'm a little bit of a control freak, and I kind of always have been, and I knew that. And I also knew that I was really nosy. If the police went by, I wanted to know where they were going and what they were doing. And so there was this natural curiosity that I always had to kind of want to go and see what they were doing and then probably solve that problem. You know, that's the way I just knew that was something I liked doing. So I would say I grew up in Texas, in a suburb town. I did have a few run-ins with the police. I actually ran from the police one time at a construction site and had cops all over us, jumped out, proned out with the guns drawn and all that. I was never afraid. I obviously thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to go to jail or something. But I didn't think they were going to hurt me. So I grew up having a respect for police, but also knowing that I just wanted to do that job so badly. I wanted to go and be involved in everything that was going on in my city. It turns out I did not police in the city I grew up, and I'm thankful for it. I policed in a different city that's larger than where I grew up. And surprisingly, I policed in probably about a 98% minority neighborhood. And I was the only white officer that policed that district. They called me Officer Blondie. I don't know why, but you know, a lot of, I think the way I grew up in my small town translated to the type of cop I wanted to be when I got to a bigger town.
Growing up, I remember, because I live in the town that I work in, I grew up in this town, we always had officer friendly. which would be now, I guess, like the DARE officers, or what we have in Elizabeth, the lead officers. And I remember him coming into the classrooms all the time. He talked to us about safety. It was never anything that we were afraid of him. It was always a certain level of respect. And I grew up in a law enforcement family. My uncle was a police officer. I have a lot of cousins now that are police officers. So it's something that was very common in our family. But growing up, it was something that you respected. Like, I remember being a senior in high school, and I wouldn't dare cut class because I was afraid that my uncle would catch me, or one of his partners who knew me, and they would bring me home to my parents. So it was always that respect that I had towards law enforcement, but it was always that safety to some extent too, that I knew that if anything were to go wrong, or if I needed somebody, I knew that I could go to our local police officers or to the local police station, and there wasn't going to be an issue.
Back then, there was no interaction, say, between the police and the community. Only time you would deal with them if it was a call for service. And I respected the police, and I also feared the police. And I know if back in those days, before community policing, neighborhood police team and stuff, if I did something wrong, the cop would tell my father on the way home, I get whacked twice. I get whacked in the butt by the police officer in the corner, and I get whacked by my father when he got home from work. And that was no love between me and the police when in the 60s and stuff. And then as far as becoming a police officer, I was reluctant because we had a lot of public unrest like we have now. We had the Black Liberation Army was assassinating police officers, and in college, you didn't want to be the pig and this and that. So I sort of like back into police work. I was working at Chase Bank in the computer department and for a couple of years, and bachelor, I got my own bachelor pad and stuff. And it was police recruiting table, and it said there's more things to do than just patrol this and this and that. So I said, okay, pays more than the bank job? Yeah, give me the application. That's how I became a cop.
And I actually grew up in an area of Brooklyn that's called Bedford-Stuyvesant, which was predominantly African-American and Latino. And it was a tough neighborhood. Drugs, heroin was running rampant. And I grew up in what they call the New York City housing buildings, where were basically public housing. So low-income families and things of that nature. The element was negative. And I'm very fortunate to say that I was able to survive that era, because many people that I have grown up with are not alive today to be able to say that. That being said, but the police back in those times were what we used to call the man. The police came on the scene, you stood up at attention and you were respected. It's a different era now, but that's the way it was. What I did not see, and I believe still even currently, there were not enough representation of African-American or Latino American officers. That definitely made a difference for me. I thought I would want to be part of that change. And I never forget, there was an officer named Mr. Maynard, Officer Maynard, who when he came in, and he swung that nightstick or threw that nightstick at you, he got your attention. And when he would tell you to move and you say, why should I move? He said, because the police said you got to move. So, and police officers command respect back then. So, and I thought, and the whole community service thing and the safety thing was all part of that whole component. So that's what inspired me to become and get involved in law enforcement.
Baxter, I see you smiling. It seems like some of that resonated with your.
Actually, no. I, of course, my background is different. In that I migrated from Jamaica. So in Jamaica, the police, we tend to have a lot of respect for, generally speaking. As far as the way I felt, the police maintain a higher standard of integrity. They were like, above everybody else. They represented the upper echelon. And personally, I wanted to be a part of that. So when I came to the United States, I didn't have a lot of interaction with the police per se. Again, because of neighborhood, you know, I came to the United States as a teenager, and I lived in Manhattan in a predominantly white area. Yeah, it's mixed, but I didn't see the police much. But at the same time, once I moved and I started, you know, I went to college, I started to, of course, interact with, you know, people. And I was part of a wrestling team for a short time. And at the time, a lot of my friends, they were talking about becoming cops or firemen. So it was mostly civil service. And I just didn't see myself being a fireman. And immediately I said, you know, cops was what I always admired as a kid in Jamaica. So that's what I wanted to take the exam and try out to see if I could make it. That's how it happened.
When I was child, I saw the police and I say, "Hey, it was heroes. It was amazing when people need help. They come very fast and they help a lot." And I say, "Oh, it's amazing." And another time in the school, some police come to the class and speak about the police, and there are different. There are scientific police, explosive dogs, and I say, "It's amazing. You can have different works inside the police, and you have different works in different days." Como diría, cada día es diferente.
She said every day is different.
It's so emotional for me. I say, this is perfect. I didn't have a family with a police family, and no friends, nothing with this profession. And I decide it's my perfect profession. I want to be police. I want to help, because when somebody needs help, I want to help. I want to go to the situation to give all my help. And I decide, okay, I want to be police. And all my family say, no, it's not safe for you. You can be other thing. You know, I study law, and my mother, no, please. You can be law, and say, no, I want to be police. I want to go to the street. I want to help. I want to, I love this, and I want to be like one hero. I think this profession is a hard profession, and I think it's one emotion profession, and for me it's perfect.
What struggles have you faced as females in law enforcement, and how has your martial arts training maybe impacted that?
For me, even going into the academy was a challenge. Again, I've always dealt with weight issues. So when I went into the academy, I was overweight. And I'll never forget the instructors, like literally picking on me. And it was funny because I was just talking to my husband about this last night. I would leave the academy every day, and I'd come home and I would tell my mother, I'm not going back. I'm not going back. And the next morning I was up at 3 o'clock in the morning again, getting ready to be up at the academy. And it's probably going to tie in with something else that you asked later on. But to me, the only reason why I was able to get through the police academy was, one, it was something I had a desire to do. I really, really wanted to be a police officer. I wanted to show people that I can do it. And my martial arts training was a big help, because when I first started training, I didn't like sparring. Sparring wasn't my thing. I would not spar. I didn't want to fight anybody. To me, fighting was like off limits. And my instructor used to like agitate me to get me to the point where I would get heated enough to find that fire within myself to fight. And if it hadn't been for that training, I wouldn't have made it through the police academy, because it was that drive that motivated me to say, hey, listen, yeah, they're picking on me, but this is just a mind game they're playing with me, because I have to get through. This is what's going to push me through. So for me, martial arts was a big part of my training. And even being in the academy, I was, like you said, one of very few women. I was the shortest female, one of the shortest females in my academy class. I was the heaviest female in my academy class. I remember when we fired the shotguns at the range, I actually bruised from my shoulder all the way down to my forearm, not because I didn't put it in the pocket, right? But because it's just, my body's just made that way. I bruised for nothing. And my doctor said to me, you're not going to be able to train. You're not going to be able to go to the academy. You're not going to be able to do the exercises for at least 2 weeks. I looked at the doctor and I said, you must be out your mind. I said, you don't understand. I'm in a man's world and I have to do this. I went back to the academy and the instructor's like, well, didn't the doctor tell you you can't train? You know, you can't work out? I said, well, she just said that I'm a little bruised, but I can get through this. And in the end, a lot of the instructors came back and said that they didn't think that me going in, I was going to graduate the academy, but they said that I really had the heart. And again, I chucked that up to my martial arts training and the support that I got from my family and of course God, because otherwise there wouldn't have been a way.
We don't have difference, and I don't feel difference in the boys and girls. But years ago, yes, there are few girls, and she has to work very hard to show, mostrar a la gente, ¿no? Como demostrar
person or show the public, show people.
Public that is, they are very hard. Now I think the difference is outside. Maybe somebody think that the girls, there are few. When you say stop, it's a girl, maybe somebody say, but I think that we have to teach the children that the girls and the policewoman are in the same level that the boys. I think hay gente todavía fuera que sí que lo ve, que cuando para una mujer o cuando habla una mujer sí que es como menos, ¿no?
She says that on the outside, like when we're dealing with civilians, there are people that look at us as female officers like, well, she's just a female.
Pero que noto que no es la mayoría, que ya noto que ya está empezando una igualdad y que era hace tiempo, pero que todavía hay gente que sí que los ve como en minoría.
Back a while back, it was a lot more people that looked at us that way. Nowadays, it's not as many. She thinks that there has been a change, but she says that there's still a few people that have to learn that, you know, men and women are still at the same level.
And I'm imagining for all of you, men as well, that your martial arts training has played a big role in your history within law enforcement. I have a cousin, my cousin Bobby is from Southside Chicago, and he spent over 30 years in law enforcement there, you know, where there's a lot of violence. And he would talk to me as he kind of ascended up the ranks and wasn't on the streets as much about how he always wished he would have got into martial arts more. He said, you know, when they first got in, there was the initial training, and then once he was in, it really didn't continue. And, you know, even like his health and his weight kind of got away from him. I'd love to know in what ways do you think continued martial arts training could benefit law enforcement? And I'll start with you, Mr. Baxter, this time. In what ways do you feel like maybe continuous martial arts training, or is that starting to become more regular?
Well, for certain, I think that the police departments should be trained more with martial arts, and there should be a continuation of training in martial arts. The police department puts emphasis on certain aspect of development and training for officers. One example is firearms. And, you know, you see today we have so many shooting. And like the New York City Police Department, we have to do a requalification, so to speak. Was it once a year?
Twice.
Correct, Cedric? Twice a year.
Twice. So
it's like every 6 months, you have to requalify with your weapon or weapons that you do. And it's pretty intensive training. There, since you graduate from the police academy, I've never been given any additional hand-to-hand training, combative training, other than what I received in the academy. And as far as I see it, I mean, we see what's going on today. The cops to me, are not able to handle, for the most part, physical confrontation. They resort to one or two things. And we see how much complications have developed over the years with a chokehold and then the knee and the back and then the neck and all of these issues, because they don't have enough training in dealing with let's say a suspect who's violent, or a suspect that's not cooperating. So if we put as much emphasis on, how to shoot accurately into combative training, I think it would definitely be helpful for law enforcement. I mean, I have a son that's, on the job right now, and we had this discussion last time he was at my house, and he was a black belt. He trained with us, then he boxed, and so he's always, training himself. But we got into the situation where he was so upset with the changes now that are happening, where the laws have been written where you cannot use the chokehold, you cannot use the knee. And for him, it's very disturbing that without resorting to chokeholds and the knee, you cannot contain a suspect who doesn't want to be arrested willingly. And so we actually got into it at the house. I'm showing him some of my moves. And then he said, "No, Pops, this ain't going to work." But of course, he was getting the better of me because, being my age and him being 220 pounds and 6 feet 3 inches tall, he was showing me that without the knee and without the chokehold, it's hard. So at the end of it, I said to him, "But, don't you see then why it's important to have more training? Because it is difficult if someone doesn't want to be arrested, how you contain them." So yes, there should be a lot more emphasis on martial arts training for police officers. I think they would be more prepared.
Could I just chime in here too?
Yeah, we'll go right ahead, Ina, and then Brody, we'll come back to you afterwards.
I think too, you guys do this day in and day out. Martial arts is another way of life for you. You know what I mean? So it's something that's habit forming, and what happens with us in law enforcement, we don't have that habit forming when it comes, like you said, to the combat training. My job just recently started doing more trainings when it comes to things like that, like different takedowns and things like that, to get us more prepared so that we are practicing those things. I think if people had the ability to practice more, it'd be different. For you guys, the advantage is it's when you're in martial arts, it's second nature. So you've already got it in your head that if somebody grabbed me this way, this is how I'm going to react. Where in law enforcement, they don't have the opportunity. They're not given that steady over time. So to some extent, if they did allow, or if they did push more training, I think it'd be totally different.
Thank you. Mr. Burns?
Yeah, David, I think this is really the crux of a lot of things that we're seeing now. Is I got my black belt the same year, my first year on the job. So of course, when you get your first black belt, you are, in your mind, invincible. And so I saw several times where I would go to a scene with another officer, and they handled the scene a lot different than I wanted to handle it, because they were afraid of getting hurt. I wasn't afraid of getting hurt. I knew that I had the physical skills to defend myself and handle the situation. So I was more focused on actually solving the problem rather than worrying about getting hurt. Sometimes could I have been wrong and that officer was right and I was in jeopardy and I didn't realize it? I don't think so, but maybe. But I think when the officers are reacting now and they just don't have the confidence in their ability to defend themselves, should it go bad, they're reacting to the total problem by out of fear, they're busy trying to mitigate getting hurt or getting in a fight, and I don't care what you say, nobody likes fighting. And but as a black belt, you go, I can handle this if it goes that way, but let's solve the problem first. And so I think that's a big thing. That's not happening. If the officers had more confidence in their physical ability to defend themselves, you would see that the actual use of force would go down. I mean, it's the same thing. They did this study when OC spray first came out. I know tasers are the big thing, but I was before tasers. So, but OC spray came out, and it was the use of OC spray went up when it first came out and then went down. Total use of force went down because officers knew they had a tool if they needed it to solve the problem. So they dealt with solving the problem, right? Rather than worrying about their safety. So no, I think you're hitting it right on there. We need to do more training. And, I was in an area where there was a lot of hand-to-hand fighting to arrest people. They did not want to be arrested. And so me and my partner, we would go to the substation at night and we would wrestle. We would do fighting. We would try and arrest each other because that confidence helped us solve the problem. So no, I think that's the nail on the head, quite honestly, in a lot of situations.
Like the other gentleman says, I agree with 100%. There is no incentive to continue training and techniques after you left the academy. And the problem is, like, before you use deadly physical force, the courts have ruled that the officer must fear for their life or their safety. With the martial arts background, I've been in situations where I wasn't afraid, but another officer in the same situation would have used deadly physical force because, like Mr. Brody said, it's the confidence that you can handle the situation. I had a guy, I'm sitting in my patrol car, he breaks a bottle and holds my door shut and he's slashing at me with the broken bottle. So I would have been justified in using my firearm, but I didn't. I got out of the car, whacked his arm with the nightstick, the bottle went down, elbow, throw, down, didn't punch him, didn't kick him, anything, cuffed him because of my background and my training. And that could have been a deadly shooting incident. And another time, some kids come running out of a drugstore and the last one comes out yelling and screaming and fired a shotgun in their direction 10 feet away from me. He didn't see the police car. So then I realized our training is for me to get behind barriers and say, please don't move, drop the gun. But I realized this guy was a store employee and these kids were probably messing with him and he just overreacted. So I actually snuck up behind him and took the shotgun away from him. Again, because of my background training, what makes someone else afraid wasn't me. Again, because I was afraid if I told this kid, please don't move, and he turns around with the shotgun, it might have gone bad. But because of my training and my background, like you said, there's the different levels of anxiety and fear.
I actually concurred with everything that's been discussed so far. But I do know for fact, and if I speak to just the New York City Police Department, after my academy training, there were no emphasis on hand-to-hand combat training or restraint training or learning how to restrain people. And everything was more firearm related, as previously mentioned. I do know for fact now that the police department is trying to up their game a little bit because they do have a defensive tactic team now that they're trying to train officers in different restraints and things of that nature. However, this, I think, is a good start. However, it's logistically, I don't think the officers will get as much training as they need. If you take the New York City Police Department that has 35,000 officers, 35,000, how do you adequately provide some sort of continuing martial arts or restraint or self-defense program for these officers? So there's some logistic problems in large metropolitan police departments that to try to enhance those programs.
I wanted to add, Cedric, what you're saying, it's a fact, yes, but wherever there is a will, there's a way. And that's the job of the upper echelon to figure out how to implement these training, because obviously they see what the alternative is that more and more and more people are getting shot and killed innocently, so to speak, when I say innocently, because it could have been averted. Like Doc gave examples of how he disarmed, two perpetrators. So, of course, it has to be implemented as an integral part of training, just like firearms training. That's what I was alluding to earlier. So you say twice a year, you have to go to the, whatever you want to call it, and train for the day, and at least do a couple of hours, 2-3 hours, martial arts, whatever the skills are. They're going to teach self-defense, whatever it is, apprehension, restraints, so forth and so on. I think it can be done.
I'm not actually not defending the senior management, let's say, for police department, New York City Police Department. Absolutely. I guess it depends on their level of priority in that area. I guess that's the bottom line. And I used the NYPD as an example because it's a very large department. So logistically, that's all I'm pointing out. I can see how that can be a burden. Yeah, there's a will, there's a way. But maybe smaller jurisdictional law enforcement may have that luxury where they can enhance their program and have more of a continuing program. That was just my point I just wanted to share.
Yeah.
Mr. Burns?
It's an interesting paradigm. To solve a problem of excessive force, you have to teach more force, right? You have to teach force more. So it's interesting. I can see, I wouldn't envy management in any of these departments where they have to say, okay, this is the solution to the problem, because across the board, people are calling for less force training, less instructional tools, all of those things. When I think those of us out there have said, hey, more force education, actually learning how to do it more, will overall reduce excessive force.
Yeah. Well, what's really interesting that I'm hearing, well, first I'll say, I think if you look at the history of the United States, there's been a relationship between martial arts and the police force. I read about Fumio Demore and how he would get pulled into the police department. Thomas LaPuppet, often many times would come in and they would have him speak to them and show them different techniques. And so I think there is the space for it, especially when you look at the growing popularity of martial arts and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and things of that nature. The access to it is so much greater now than it's ever been. And if we look at the benefits that it provides, most of you in here teach the more you know, the more your confidence goes up, and the less violent you become, the less aggressive you become. And it's this interesting paradox that, one, because I know more, I also recognize what I don't know, right? It's not that I'm fearless and I'm, this machismo mindset, but it's that, like, I don't want to harm anybody because I know what could happen to me. And I also don't rush to, maybe pulling a weapon when I recognize my body as a tool as well. So I think Mr. Baxter mentions it, right? Like, if you have to get firearm testing twice a year, why not get almost like Don testing, right? Like, prove that you can handle these certain situations, put them in different holds and restraints and talk about it. So I think there's a lot of ways, and I'm not a law enforcement, but I think that if there's a willingness, then there can be a lot of options out there.
Something I noticed too, I don't know about you guys in your departments, but in my department, when a lot of the older generation gets told that they have to learn something new, it's, they put up this front, like, why do I have to learn this? I've got 20 something years on the job. Instead of taking it on as, what, this might improve my skills at work. So I think that's part of the issue too. When you're dealing with such a broad scape of people on the job, you have people that just started, which are newbies, which are going to be gung-ho about learning anything, and guys that are already halfway out the door, or, maybe 2 years out. They're going to see it as, now I got to get this new training. Why? Because these kids don't know how to do their job. I went to a training last summer, as a matter of fact, and it was like self-defense tactics and takedown tactics and things like that. I was gung-ho about it. Let's do this, let's get it done. I was psyched. But then I'm going there with guys that have a few more years on than I do, and they're like, why do we have to do this? Guys that were in the Marines, well, I did this differently when I was in the Marines. Well, things change. And I don't know about you, but in law enforcement, we're creatures of habit. And when we're given change, a lot of people don't know how to handle it. So I think that's part of the problem too.
Ms. Palacios, do you feel like your martial arts training has helped you with being on the force?
Sorry first, because maybe I say one thing that is opponent that you say before, because I don't understand all the things. But I think that the martial arts are so important in two ways. First, in the mind, because I think that if you practice karate and you know to defend you can front one situation better than the other people that never knows how can defend. And in other sides, I think this is important because when you know how use your body and how can you cuando tú sabes cómo reducir al otro o cómo usar tu fuerza, es mejor a la hora de solucionar porque puedes acortar la...
Your body and your strength, it's different. You know, it's better for you to solve the situation or take control of the situation.
Sí, pienso que debería enseñarse más en la academia, porque aquí en España no es obligatorio, y creo que puedes reducir tanto las lesiones tuyas propias como las del propio detenido o la persona que intenta.
A lot of like what you guys were saying too. She says she feels that martial arts should be taught in the academy, and it should be something that's taught throughout because it's a way to avoid people getting hurt. And, you know, one, from us avoiding to hurt anybody else and avoiding getting hurt.